KW International Children's Games Committee, and more importantly, our athletes and their families and coaches who are here this evening as well, and we'll be hearing from them in a little bit. To begin with, we'll start with the singing of O Canada. Tonight we are the collective choir, so I'll invite you to stand as you're able and join in the singing of our national anthem. Thank you, and I noticed that some of our young athletes were singing in French this evening, which is an appropriate thing, that considering that today is Franco-Ontarian Day, and so great to see that happening. It's been moved by Councillor Fernandez that the minutes of the regular meeting held August 28th and the special meetings held August 28th and 30th and September 11th, as mailed to the mayor and councillors, be accepted. Councillor Yunetsky, you have you're okay. No, you're cued in on the microphone, so I'll turn you off. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, there being none, and there is no communications, so we'll move into presentations. And where are our folks? From economic development. Oh, there you are. Okay. So I'm turning it over to you, I guess. To who's speaking to? Okay. Where's Rob?
Press go ahead, that one. Oh, there we go. So recently, the City of Kitchener's Make It Kitchener Economic Development Strategy was selected for 2 International Economic Development Awards for marketing and communication among 650 other entries. And so we were selected Gold Award for our Make It Kitchener website, which we've taken a different approach with than our traditional City of Kitchener website. And we've used it as sort of an opportunity to create a two-way dialogue with economic industry in Kitchener to give people an opportunity to connect with the city and promote their business. So that won a Gold Award, which we're very proud of. And we also won a Silver Award for the series of short videos that we've been sharing on social media to encourage people to get engaged in the Make It Kitchener strategy, to make it spark, make it start, make it grow, and make it excellent in the City of Kitchener. So we're very proud to have accepted those awards on behalf of the city.
Wonderful. And so I will, are we passing? Yeah. I guess we're just passing them around, so maybe I can ask the clerk to pass them around. I will take this opportunity to congratulate staff from our Corporate Communications and Marketing Division, from Economic Development, as well as our marketing agency that developed the campaign, Intent Communications. And this is now amounts to, I believe, a total of 8 awards that are either provincial, national, and now international in nature for the work with Make It Kitchener. So congratulations to all of the staff involved, as well as our partners at Intent. for the work that you've done. I think it's a great acknowledgement of the fact that you came up with something very innovative in terms of the new brand. So congratulations. We'll now move on to item B and the KW International Children's Games, and I'll invite Robbie Mulder, the president of the Games Committee, to come forward.
Mayor Verbanvik, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening on behalf of the Kitchener-Waterloo International Children's Games. Method Clements founded the International Children's Games in 1968 with the aim of promoting peace and friendship through sports to the world's youth. In the past 51 years, the Summer Games have attracted over 45,000 participants, representing 450 cities from over 80 countries from all 5 continents. The Games are considered to be the largest gathering of young people to take part in sport in the world. On June 30th, we sent our delegation to Kaunas, Lithuania, and we were fortunate to have Mayor Verbanvik to send off the delegation at the bus. And as I drove away and the delegation took off, I realized that I was waving at Mayor Verbanvik instead of having him stand beside me for our photo op. Joining us here this evening are the members of the Kitchener delegation that competed at these games. I would like to introduce them to you now. You may wish to hold your applause until all the names have been read. So representing boys basketball, we have Aaron Brush, Ethan Izzard, Goner Kang, and Coach Mike Quigley. For girls basketball, we have Dina Orevek, Lauren Cathan, Davna McLean, Jillian Tulipalo, and Coach Melissa Tulipalo. Our swimmers were Michelle Lynn, Alexander Menard, Andrew Kuiper, and Brett Morose, and unfortunately Coach Alexander Johnson, who has joined us at 2 games, is at the pool tonight coaching athletes so that we can take them in future years. From table tennis, we have Patrick Ibrahim, Michael Jaskar, and Coach Attila was unfortunately not able to join us tonight, as was athlete Marina Ilias. The athletes and coaches were able to make this trip with the dedicated assistance of Vanessa Rama, who has no children and ventured to take 14, 12 to 15-year-olds across the world. Congratulations, Vanessa, job well done. I would now like to ask our swimmer, Andrew Kuiper, to come up and present to the mayor. So Andrew is presenting a plaque of the delegation with the City of Kitchener flag. In closing, I would like to thank the members of our board, the City of Kitchener, and their staff members, Bob Shane and Ashley Purvis, who have provided assistance to this wonderful program. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Jill, one of our basketball athletes. She would like to share with you some of the experiences that the athletes enjoyed while in Lithuania. And as you can see, the photos, I think those go along to what Jill has to say. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Verbanvik, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jill Tulipano, and I was 13 years old when I participated in the International Children's Games being held in Kaunas, Lithuania. The International Children's Games is where kids from all over come together to play sports. It was created by Method Clements, whose childhood suffered from World War II, and he wanted to create a better world based on friendship. Sports seem to be one of the best means to bring together young people from different countries. Therefore, you need willpower and friends who are enthusiastic about sport and who are willing to give up their spare time. Many sports were being held there. Table tennis, soccer, athletics, or as we call it, track and field, swimming, and so much more. My sport was 3-on-3 basketball. The games were a great opportunity to not only meet new people from Kitchener, but also other countries. I made friends with kids from Israel, Australia, Lithuania, Slovenia, Malta, and Germany. In fact, the Germany kids and the coach from Germany are wanting to come to Canada to visit us. The games were also a great opportunity because we got to learn what it would have been like to live in a place that's history was all about war. The 3 days before the games were a great bonding time for our delegation and let us see some of the historical sites. We went to see the Sports Hall of Fame to see some of Lithuania's sports history. While we were waiting for the bus to come pick us up, we all played bump basketball behind the building. The director came out and took a photo of us. He told us he wanted to put it on display inside. My favorite historical site had to have been the Ninth Fort. The fort started out as a first line of defense for the city of Kaunas during the First World War, but never actually was used. The other 8 forts were defeated and the 9th surrendered. During the Second World War, the fort was used as a concentration camp. Many people were killed there. This fort shows a lot of history about Lithuania and also helps us explain their quote this year. We are here to change our history. Their history isn't very good. A lot of countries have invaded, and they have been under many different rulers. My favorite part of the games was the social times in between competitions. There was time to talk with the other countries and trade pins. We traded a lot of pins. Our girls' basketball team had time to go and watch the swimmers and table tennis compete, and even some of the athletics, even though none of us competed in that. My least favorite part were the bus rides to get to the venues. They were very long and there were so many people on the buses you could hardly move. But we did make lots of friends there because we were so close together. The dorms where we stayed were nice. Our basketball team and swimming team were in the same room and table tennis was right beside us. We were really close to each other and was a great bonding place too. The food wasn't that great. Breakfast and dinner were served at the dormitories and were buffet style. Our lunch consisted of a salad or sandwich with water, a bun, and an apple, served at our competition site. For me, the highlight of the whole trip was the social evening. One word to describe it was awesome. You got to play a lot of games. Foosball, where you were the actual people, normal foosball, and wipeout. During the social evening, there was a foam pit. We got soaked. There was fireworks, music, and so much more. We got to hang out with all the other kids and made lots of new friends. That night was the best night ever. And even though our girls' basketball team didn't do very well during our competitions, it was an experience that I will never forget. Winning isn't everything. There was so much more. I would like to thank the ICG and the City of Kitchener for selecting me and the rest of our delegation to be a part of this. I also want to thank the other athletes here and the delegation. Without them, I don't think it would have been as mind-blowing. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to congratulate all of you for your participation in the games and thank your coaches and your families for their support. I know a lot of effort went in the months leading up to your trip to Lithuania, to fundraising and so on, in order to ease some of the burden on individual families when you went. I know from participating in the past with some of our teams in a few of these games, often one of the best memories that comes from it is the connections that you make with other young people from around the world, and it really is an opportunity for us to demonstrate how small the world is and how in fact we are all very much similar and alike as human beings on our planet. And so it's great to see that by the sounds of it you all had a similar experience here, that you had an opportunity to learn a little bit about the history of this country and how fortunate we are in Canada in terms of our own history and the peace that exists here. and hopefully we'll be able to see perhaps you, but certainly other young people participate in future games going forward. So again, on behalf of council, thank you for the team picture, and thanks for representing our community so well. Okay. I think that's in order. I will say you're all more than welcome to stay the balance of the evening if you want to watch Democracy in Action. But if you decide that you rather would go on and do other things, we won't be offended. Okay, we'll next move on to our third presentation, and that's Gord Troughton, the Director of Corridor Infrastructure for the Kitchener Line, and Aaron Morose, the Director of Communications and Community Relations for Metrolinx, to provide an overview of planned works to improve GO service along the Kitchener Rail Corridor. And you can hang on for a minute to get going until our visitors depart.
The clicker.
Got the clicker. It's hard to be that kind of happy of it.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, city staff, ladies and gentlemen. As mentioned, my name is Gord Troughton. I'm the Director of the Kitchener Corridor for Metrolinx. And with me is Aaron Morose. She's the Director of Communications and Community Relations, and we're not sure if she's related to the young athlete of the same name.
Yes.
Not same last name, I should say. Just wanted to start the presentation by acknowledging the partnership that's gone on so far between City staff and Metrolinx, and I'm going to talk about the work we plan to do on the Kitchener Corridor, but first provide just a little bit of context. As you all probably know, one of our greatest challenges in the greater Golden Horseshoe area is congestion, costing between $6 and $11 billion a year in lost economic activity. Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge area is growing at 5.5%, which is higher than the national average. I'm sure you know this. I just want you to know that we know it too at Metrolinx, and that's why we want to take time to come and talk about the investments that we're making in the area. So we have a plan. The Greater Golden Horseshoe is in the middle of a large transformation. Through this transformation, overall travel in the Golden Horseshoe we expect to double in the next few years. And our plan is to build as much rapid transit as we can, subways, trains, light rail, and buses. The plans creates enormous economic benefit. 800,000 to 900,000 person years of employment, and up to 110 to 130 boost to the economy. 130 billion, not $130. That's my first time with that slide, sorry. So we deliver the program. We plan, operate, and build transit at Metrolinx, and as the Director of the Kitchener Corridor, I'm here to talk specifically about what we're building on Kitchener Corridor in the years to come. So one of the largest infrastructure projects in North America that's going on right now is the Regional Express Rail System for GO. It's 150 kilometers of new track region-wide, new electric trains, building new bridges and tunnels to accommodate the rail traffic, renovate and build new existing GO stations, to bring transit closer to everyone in the region. There's a great deal of work being done on the Kitchener Corridor. The Kitchener Corridor is 101 kilometers between Union Station and downtown Kitchener. Metrolinx currently owns about 79% of the corridor, and we'll talk a little bit about the middle section that we don't own and what we're doing to try and obtain that as well. Current plans on the corridor will result in 16 stations, including a new station in Breslau. We'll connect GO service to Grand River Transit, Guelph Transit, Brampton Transit, My Way in Mississauga, the TTC, and to Up Express. And when we try and build, what we're trying to do for that middle section is to build a freight bypass. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we'll be able to improve service to Kitchener. So when we started in 2011, we had 4 trains. We now are up to 8 trains a day coming to Kitchener. The line provides weekday rush hour train service between Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto. 4 trains east in the morning and 4 west in the afternoon. 3 new bus routes were launched in 2016 and additional service on a 4th with time connections between Kitchener and the GO network. So to talk about what we're going to build to have the 30-minute service to Kitchener. One of the largest components on this list is additional track from Union Station to Mount Pleasant GO Station in Brampton to allow for all-day, 2-way, 15-minute electrified service between Union and Mount Pleasant. In addition to bringing that service, electrified GO service to Kitchener is expected to result after investment of $2.25 billion, additional funds beyond the 13.5 that's for RER. 1.45 billion of that is for the freight bypass, 500 million to electrify the corridor between Bramalea and Kitchener, and 300 million to build the additional track required between Georgetown and Kitchener. So to talk about the freight bypass, so in addition to investing in the existing corridor, the province of Ontario has reached an agreement in principle with Canadian National Rail to build a new 30-kilometre freight corridor between Brampton and Milton. And that would free up the 19-kilometre stretch that CN currently owns between Bramalea and Georgetown to be available for more transit. We plan to build the freight bypass along with CN and get their freight off the corridor and open up the tracks for transit. We're currently doing a feasibility review with CN, including some additional studies that we have been requested by them. Following that review, the new corridor will be subject to an environmental assessment, including public engagement, to help inform the work. Preliminary work indicates that the amount of enabling works required on the bypass is pretty staggering. It's about 35 new bridges, 60 kilometre of new tracks, modification of up to 17 of the large hydro towers, and 3.4 kilometres of major gas line to be relocated. The next steps that we're undertaking, we're continuing our negotiations with CN to get a full agreement from the agreement in principle that we have in place now. Once that is completed, we'll undertake some public engagement and work on the design and the environmental assessment at the same time. There's also some other infrastructure improvements that we're also planning for electrification. We can only electrify a section of rail corridor that we own. So we're working up to Bramalea right now until the freight bypass is built. However, part of the discussions that we're having with CN as part of the larger freight bypass discussion would be to do some early electrification on that section of corridor that we don't currently own. So between here and Toronto, we have a lot of new track to be built. There's a 52-kilometre section between Georgetown and Kitchener, as well as a 4th track between Union and Mount Pleasant. So about 100 kilometres of new track in total. We're doing new stations at Liberty Village, St. Clair West, and Mount Dennis in Toronto, and the Breslau GO station here in Waterloo region. So for Breslau, at the June 2016 meeting, the Metrolinx board approved the new station. Feel the station is a good opportunity to attract new riders from a wider catchment area, and Breslau station supports nearby transit-oriented development as well. We're also happy to be working with Waterloo Region to make upgrades to the Kitchener GO station as part of the King Victoria Transit Hub. we would move our Kitchener GO station down to the ION and LRT station that's being built on King. And details of the GO and bus and rail facilities are still in development with the region, but it's part of the broader hub development. We've also done some work at Shirley Avenue in Kitchener. Train layover for the 4 trains that we bring has been built, and the rail portion of the Shirley work is now complete. The second phase at Shirley Avenue is a GO bus facility, so storage for 20 buses, capacity for both the single and the double-decker buses, washing facilities, and fueling facilities as well. So that's what we have for our construction program, and I'll turn it over to Erin to talk a bit about community engagement.
Thanks, Gord. This is pretty quick, but I just want to put the slide up here to say a few things. One is, especially for the work in Kitchener, though, as Gord has just pointed out, we have a number of projects that are at different phases. So we have Shirley Layover that's halfway through construction. We have things going into EA. We have things that also are at the very beginning of kind of feasibility work. I think it's pretty overwhelming sometimes to us, and it tends to be overwhelming to communities in terms of where they can provide feedback and how they can provide feedback to us as we work through the community. So this slide is to just really exemplify that for most of us, especially in municipal planning processes, this type of cycle is actually more linear. So people are used to feasibility, environmental assessment, having consultation during the environmental assessment, moving forward with the project. I think the main difference for us right now with this size of a program is that we are touching communities at all parts of this cycle at all times. So I think the key message for community, and as we work with residents, is that we connect with community and accept feedback at all parts of the cycle. So there isn't one window where it's over and that closes and you can't provide feedback. We're there in the beginning in terms of planning stages. We'll be there taking feedback during design stages, but we're also there, me and my team, through construction. So construction is a big one in terms of dust, noise, traffic impacts, etc., which we'll work with the municipality on as well. But we are here through the whole process working with the community. To date, we've had some pretty high-level engagement. We appreciate the invitation from the mayor today to do a pop-up in the library. We're looking for any opportunities that you may have locally in your wards, any kind of fun fairs, anything where residents are going to naturally be that we can come out and provide information. We're happy to do that. The final slide is just some of our contact information if you are interested in reaching out to us. Laura is a full-time community relations specialist dedicated to Kitchener, and so you can contact her at any time, but my contact information is up there as well as Mr. Troughton's. And with that, we'll turn it back over to you in terms of questions.
Thank you very much, and we have a number of questions for you. Just 2 quick things before I open up the floor. Is it okay if staff circulates this presentation to council so they have a copy of it?
Definitely.
Wonderful, thank you. And then the second one, I just do want to acknowledge that former Mayor Zaire, who now sits on the Metrolinx board, had hoped to be here this evening, but unfortunately had another commitment. So he does send his regrets, but I know this is something that he has and continues to follow very closely. So with that, I'll open up the floor to questions, and we'll start with Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanvik. Thanks, Erin, and thanks, Todd, for a great presentation, and any information with regards to enhanced service to our community is great news. One question I want to ask is regards to one of the very first few slides when it had the dollar figure. And it was, I can't remember what it was $15 billion or?
Sorry, there was a few dollar figures, so we can...
Yeah, 6 to 11 billion a year in lost economic activity. To me, that's a stunning amount of dollars that's just being wasted in congestion. And the question I'm asking is why is it taking us so long in general to to look at other alternatives for transit, in particular with rail. Because to me, right there, that says it right at all. Like, we should be doing this right now and speeding up as fast as we can.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what you've seen in this presentation is both an understanding of that, but I would say further, the scale and scope of the amount of infrastructure that's needed is pretty significant. So the good news is that when Gord and I come out to council, it means that we're working on funded and approved programs. We're the level where we're actually tasked with building something. And so that's why we're in front of council tonight. But what I would say is this lovely man has to build all that with his team. The good news is that he did deliver Express on time and on budget, so he already has that type of project with the scale and scope under his belt. But it's just a significant amount of work. It's a significant amount of funding, and it's quite a significant undertaking. Yeah.
No doubt, and I know it is a big task, and I'm not taking this lightly when I'm mentioning this. I just feel that it should just be, this should be our #1 priority for our country, period. And that's how I feel. Okay, thank you.
We couldn't agree with you more. We are from a transit agency. Yeah.
So I think what they're saying, but not saying, is keep advocating with the province. Councillor Singh, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to echo the same sentiment from Councillor Ioannidis. Obviously, the economic opportunity and the loss until we have that connection, appropriate connection, it's staggering. So the real holdback, I'm guessing, is that bypass. And you mentioned that the work is ongoing with that. Is there an aspect of timelines that you'd want to touch on?
Sorry, I'm just flipping to the appendix because we did give it, there's a bit of a breakdown. This will come around to councillors as well. But this slide shows you approximately the schedule we're working with at a high level in terms of the breakdown of activities that are required for that freight bypass.
So we're looking at procurement for the lands and all that would be 4 years?
We're looking at a total, so some of these are concurrent.
Oh, I see.
Activities. Okay. So we have a 7-year project schedule, right? And this is some of the activities that need to take place, but some of those are concurrent, and we're working within that 7-year time schedule.
And I agree with Councillor Ioannidis. I wish that could happen sooner than 7 years, as you outlined. But you guys are confident that we will meet within that 7-year timeline?
Certainly that's our target. I think the biggest thing will be the environmental assessment as we go through.
Okay.
Realizing that we've been out to a lot of the councils in the Kitchener area, the Waterloo region. They're all very anxious to see this service, but you are moving freight traffic from one part of the region to another. So that part of it, people are going to have obviously a say in that as well, where it affects their neighborhoods too. So that plus just the physical building of the infrastructure, we just want to make sure we go through the steps properly and give everybody the chance to speak.
And I appreciate that. So how adaptable will the infrastructure be? Because again, it is another 7 years, and technology is transforming, changing at a very rapid pace, and other options that could be available in the next 10 years even. So the infrastructure that will go in, will it be adaptable for new things that may come down the road?
So we are currently, and we've announced that we are undertaking a feasibility study of the use of hydrogen, so Hydrel. I think the one element of this program that is most probable to change would be whether you have an electric system run by electrical wires and poles, or whether or not that electric train could be powered by something like hydrogen. So recently, the minister announced a feasibility study that's concurrent to the work that we're doing to electrify, and that is seriously looking at hydrogen as a possible alternative. Germany has just ordered a number of hydrogen trains, smaller trains than our larger GO trains that you see today, but they're piloting it, and we are looking to see if that is feasible and possible for our network.
And these alternate fuel sources like hydrogen, that would allow for faster speeds than electrification?
It would still be an electric vehicle, so you would still have the same benefit that you receive from electrification in terms of stop and start times, etc.
But with the electrified grid and with the bypass, it could in the future accommodate for high-speed rail as well?
High-speed rail?
High-speed rail, I can talk about. No matter what we do for high-speed rail, how fast we take our trains, whatever, we need the track, right? We need the track straight into to Toronto. You won't be able to run high-speed trains while there's freight trains on that corridor.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to get, whatever we do for high-speed rail, we have to get that bypass built. We're also working, the first project that we're working on is on the 401 to get a second tunnel underneath the 401 at the 409. It's in the market right now. Well over $100 million worth of investment there to start, because I know everything that I do starts with a service plan. So how many trains we're going to run, that drives what infrastructure that you have, and the type of train and everything else. So,
That's
but
fantastic.
nothing runs without that bypass.
No, that's completely understandable, and it's appreciated that all the infrastructure needs to go in place before we can have all that. But we can't lose sight that there is a cost and time, but we really have to reflect on the cost of not doing it fast enough. But thank you that both of you are doing in your involvement.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in for making your presentation. You mentioned that in your presentation the trains would be faster and reduce the commute times. Do you have an idea, right at this early stage, how much faster the trains might be?
So with all the GO improvements that we're doing, it'd be about 75 minutes, Kitchener to Toronto. They haven't finalized service plans. I mentioned there's 16 stations. Every station stop adds a minute or two to the trip. Currently, I think one of the trains that comes in from Kitchener in the morning goes express from Bramalea. That's sort of the model that we're looking at with the all-stop service also coming up to Bramalea. So you'd have to change trains if you were stopping between Bramalea and Union. That's something they're still working on, but we're looking at trying to get it down to 75.
Okay, and I'm hoping then there isn't really much of a chance of getting more stops added to this route. Is this sort of set at this point, or?
So we did, and I'm happy to provide it back through staff, but we did a station analysis as part of this program for over, I think, 135 stations that were requested by municipalities. The stations that you see on this corridor are the ones that have gone through analysis and have been approved by our board for build as part of this program. And so at this time, there's no intention to add anything in addition to the ones that you saw here on the slide, Breslau, and the few that are in Toronto.
Okay, great. And again, I didn't quite hear the answer. I think Councillor Singh asked the question, though. The bypass that we're building, we are building that, or the intention is to build that in a way to accommodate future high-speed rail when that gets built.
So the high-speed rail, just to clarify, that would run on the GO corridor. The bypass is between Milton and Brampton. So the high-speed rail wouldn't necessarily run along the bypass, correct?
No, so the bypass is to get the freight traffic off that middle section. I don't know if can you go back to the map? But all the passenger traffic would then run on the current Kitchener corridor between.
Oh, so the bypass is exclusively for freight?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So
is there a better map?
No, that's probably the best map we have. But
This one?
the idea is that currently the CN line, which is the blue line there, which right beside where it says Halton Region, runs basically up north from Milton, where it says Halton Region, that's Milton, along the Kitchener corridor, and then takes off and continues at the north side of Toronto. That's, I think, a blue line. The GO, sorry, I can't see the colors very well. The green GO line is the Kitchener corridor, and where they overlap, that's the difficulty for us. Putting the number of trains through there that we would like to. So somewhere along that dashed blue line, and we're vague on purpose because we haven't finalized the route yet, you would take and connect the two ends, basically close the triangle for CN, and then you would take over that section on our corridor.
Okay,
So,
very good.
sounds very easy. I'm sure CN will agree to it, no problem.
Very good. Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to add the support I've heard from other members of council. I love seeing numbers out there like 6 to 11 billion, and that's just purely in lost productivity costs. Not to mention the costs for, I think we all have, friends and family in the community that lose 3 hours a day for their family lives, for example, traveling back and forth. And the worst part is, it's when I look at it in terms of sitting in a car on the way to the 401, with our high-tech community, that's actual lost productivity time. People can, especially the coders in the community, they can actually work while they're on a train when they can't or shouldn't be working when they're in an automobile. So the only message I'd like to send here is that we really need to make sure that this issue of rail, be it go rail or high speed rail, crosses all party lines, because I've found unprecedented support for a sort of a government project for this sort of transit system.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues' comments that this is really an exciting presentation. Thank you for coming in, and I'm glad that the community watching or listening to this will be able to take note of it, and it would be good for everyone to be able to give their feedback. My question is just about two questions. One is about the high-speed rail. I was under the impression that high-speed rail would require even a different set of tracks than the GO train tracks. Is that not the case?
So yeah, there's a higher standard that you build the track to. The high-speed rail study is an MTO study, so we're just starting to work with them now to figure out what it means, but I've been told that whatever I do should not preclude future high-speed on the network. So that may mean that the track gets built to the higher standard now, or to make sure that we can build it to the higher standard later.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the second question was just about level crossings. If we electrify the corridor, how will that impact pedestrians crossing over the track?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the next steps for this would be an environmental assessment, both for electrification as well out to Kitchener. What that would mean is it would look at every level crossing, and community and others who are concerned about a particular crossing will be able to come and find out about that crossing and how it models and how, what the safety precautions that may be needed to improve the crossings. Some of the crossings have to be upgraded as we're adding track and electrification. But what I can say is electrification is probably one of the most known and kind of established safety standards that there is internationally for this type of system. And so there are a number of precautions put in place in around electrification, including things like bridge barriers so people can't dangle things onto wires, and a number of things that we're looking at as part of that environmental assessment to ensure that it's a safe interaction between cars, traffic, and pedestrians.
Mm-hmm. And so just to clarify, the track is not electrified, it's just the wire above.
Wires,
it's over, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. So you talked a little bit about environmental assessments through this freight bypass corridor. How many communities will you be having to speak to regarding the environmental assessment?
So I don't have the exact number, but I think there are a number, there's the region and there's a number of communities that are in that space. So definitely, at this point in time in feasibility work, and this will all be made public, we understand with a starting point in Milton's going to be very involved, with an end point in Brampton's going to be very involved. So as Gord said, the alignment in between will determine to some degree impact on different communities. As we said, this is kind of intentionally vague at this point because it wouldn't be fair before that process starts to, detail and alignment. But we are looking at something that is south of this corridor, and is looking at the area in between. And we're also looking at, I understand with MTO, the 407 corridor, and some options around there.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm asking is because in some communities may have some sensitive areas that they won't want a rail corridor to go through. So are you prepared for some of those roadblocks that you may run into?
Yes.
The reality is that could very well happen.
Yes, transit infrastructure, I think, in a number of areas, and I'm community and community relations and comms for the entire GO network. We've passed 10 environmental assessments so far in 2 years, and I would say there's a number of communities. We have to rebuild a bridge over the Rouge. That's a pretty sensitive area. It's a national park. And what we do with communities when there are sensitivities and environmental concerns is to work through them in that process. The sensitivity in itself doesn't determine the outcome per se. It just means we have to work with people. There's an expectation that we take extra care when we go through those areas.
Okay. So you're saying it's 7 years out before you see the full extent of your build out. Is that the time frame you were giving us?
That's the target I've been given. So.
And my understanding right now is that the trains that are running, the 4 trains that are running, take at least 2 hours to get into Toronto. Is there any way that we can shorten that time, or choose one train to shorten that time? What I'm hearing from my counterparts in the community who are trying to use GO and get off of the 401 with their cars is the timing just doesn't work. For many of them, it just doesn't work. How can we realign the timing?
So we acquired just over a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, the section from Georgetown to Kitchener. From CN, it had been leased to GEXR. It wasn't necessarily CN's highest priority as far as track goes. The level of maintenance, there's various levels of maintenance you do on track that determines how fast you can go. So we will start taking over the maintenance of this track sometime in next year, right? Anyway, very shortly, we've already been talking to them. There's certain spots along that corridor where there's very low speeds because of track maintenance. We're going to target those first to try and sort of tick away that 2-hour window for sure. But the full 75 minutes isn't until it's electrified. But we will be doing stuff in the interim as well, just to try and cut that 2 hours down.
Okay, I think that would be good news for those who are really trying valiantly to use the service. Are you seeing that you have enough ridership right now to justify the increase in what you want to do?
There is definitely a large demand along the entire Kitchener corridor. So anything right now where we have ownership and where we can bring that level of service, we're doing it because there's been a business case and ridership models, et cetera, about building it. If my planning colleagues were here, and I think as you've just noted, is that there's also a bit of a tipping point when it comes often enough that it actually increases ridership because people don't have to be worried about a schedule and missing a train, and so I do think that there is a system that's being built also on the idea that when you have a regular system that people can rely on, that increases ridership as well. But I can send you the business case if you're interested that shows how this particular corridor performs in that analysis.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that looks like all the questions from council, so maybe I'll just ask a couple of myself, and I'll begin by thanking you for coming in. I know we've had regular dialogue with Metrolinx, with the department and so on, to emphasize the importance of this moving forward, and certainly this update is appreciated. You did show the sort of the list of timelines for different aspects of the project, and the fact that some things could potentially overlap with each other. Have we sort of maximized those opportunities at this point, or are there some other areas where we can sort of do some additional tweaking to help shorten things a little bit?
I would say that we will try and do things as quickly as we can. There may be some things that we can do, say building out of sequence and things like that we'll look at once we get into the actual construction. But 7 years, I know it's a long time, but it's pretty aggressive to get something this big done as well. So.
For sure, and I think the information you provided about the number of bridges and crossings and so on really emphasizes that. So I think it's important for folks to understand that. On the issue of sort of growing the current capacity, is there any work being done to see in the meantime while all of this goes on? Is there any additional tweaking or opportunities that potentially could happen to provide some additional capacity, in particular to at least find maybe one run that goes from Toronto into Kitchener in the mornings and then back in the evenings?
So part of the negotiation that they're doing for the deal with CN will cover a lot of how quickly we can add service to there. We're very aware, I think Aaron will agree, of the request for the Toronto to Kitchener train in the morning. The reason we can't do that now is basically that means we occupy that CN section on both tracks and they basically have to stop running while we're on there. But we're aware of that, and I'm that may be part of the negotiation, but I can't say for sure.
For sure, and I guess I just really want to add, the message that you heard at Regional Council and the message you heard from my colleagues in that regard this evening. Anything we can do to help facilitate that is really important, particularly in terms of our growing tech and innovation sector. We are working collaboratively with Toronto Global on their Amazon bid in terms of linking in with them on that, and obviously an important part of making that successful would be the transportation links between our two communities going forward. So I can't emphasize that enough as something that we're hoping for. On the issue of the high speed, and you indicated that this is something that is just the dialogue is just beginning between yourselves and the MTO on this. Do you have any sense in terms of particularly things like the EA and so on? Is that an area where some coordinated efforts can happen? Because I believe that one will also involve a federal EA, I think. Yeah, we expect that the EAs, I don't know if they'll be done concurrently, but they will certainly feed each other. It's our understanding from Kitchener in, the high speed is running on the Kitchener corridor, the one that we own right now and hopefully will own when the freight bypass is done. Beyond that, I think there's some new corridor down to Windsor and things as well, but we do expect that their EA will overlap ours because it'll have to go all the way to Union. So we'll be working with them on the EAs as well. Okay, and the last question, obviously, with you co-locating with our multimodal transit facility that we're in at the region, we're in the process of considering proposals for right now. There'll still be a need for some people who aren't using LRT or Grand River Transit to actually get to a station, whether it's the downtown one or Breslau, by their own vehicle, parking, and then continuing on by rail from there. So is that something that you're going to be looking at as part of the growth of the system and the parking requirements in those two areas?
We do have a plan so Metrolinx has a parking strategy, which is updated regularly. And we look at trying to balance, I would say, what we recognize is a continuing rural need for parking and people who just don't have the option to get to the GO any other way but then to drive. Balancing that with also I'm going to Oakville soon, and their position in Oakville is everyone who's parking is actually taken away from local transit. And if you guys want us to have a successful local transit system, we need to find a balance between your parking and our zoning and our requirements and, and our local transit needs. So our planning department is having ongoing conversations with municipalities about what that right balance is. So the short answer is, yes, we're going to continue to look at parking and the needs, and we will build additional parking if it's required, but we also want to try to encourage people to get into stations through multimodal means, whether that's biking or transit or walking, as much as possible, because our plans are to quadruple ridership, and it's impossible to build enough parking to accommodate that kind of ridership.
And I would agree with you, and I don't think we want to. I think we want to try to encourage that modal shift as much as possible. And it's sort of figuring out that balance. Obviously, in a municipality like ours, that's still a two-tier system. Right. I presume that dialogue is going to happen both at the regional and at the local tier level, because, for example, much of the parking, at least in the downtown, is a municipal responsibility, while the transit system here is a regional one. Right. So I presume you'll engage your City of Kitchener staff as well in that discussion?
Definitely, yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, again, there doesn't appear to be any other questions. So on behalf of council, thank you to all of you. I know there's 4 of you here today for coming in and sharing this update with us. This is something, a file that this council has taken great interest in over the past number of years and will continue to take significant interest in going forward. I know a lot of work has happened to get us to this point, and we'll continue to work with you to see it to move forward going forward. Particularly as we get into the coming year, we'll want to make sure that this continues to be a priority of future governments after the next election, whether it's the current party in power or another party that's in place after next spring. We'll want to make sure this continues to be an equal priority, particularly for the Kitchener Corridor line going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the time, and I do just want to end by saying we intend to come back annually. We are going out to all municipalities in the region, and we know it's important that you have an opportunity to ask questions. So we would appreciate coming back sometime next year, maybe not right around the election.
Right.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and again, safe journey back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move into delegations. I do want to remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to make their presentation. Before we go into 6A, I'm going to bring forward the sign variance for 301 Charles Street East. There is someone here to answer any questions if there are any, but otherwise, if somebody wants to move that. Moved by Councillor Fernandez, seconded by Councillor Davey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now then move on to 6A, and we have 2 delegations, Mr. Peter Barr from Deloitte, and then Mr. Roger Suffling. And we'll begin with Mr. Barr. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic, and members of council, staff of the city.
And welcome, by the way, to downtown Kitchener, even though you're in a temporary home until your permanent one is done.
Well, yes, exactly. But we are in downtown Kitchener. We're enjoying it immensely, although it's been 5 days. My name is Peter Barr. I'm the managing partner of the local practice of Deloitte, and I'm here in support of the heritage permit application which is in front of you this evening. The plan to project light onto the smokestack at 195 Joseph Street, the location of our future office. And it has been many years since I've had the pleasure of being in this room around this horseshoe, so I want to thank you for this time. We are pleased to support this council's and previous council's visions for the Innovation District, and this office will be unique in our firm's entire real estate portfolio. It is not only is it our only repurposed industrial facility, it is the only office in the entire system with a smokestack. And I personally am very proud of our smokestack. I wave it in the face of my partners in Toronto rather regularly. We are the beginning or the leading edge of urban development. But our pride in our smokestack is supported by the lighting consultants that we have hired, Mulvey and Benani. They are award-winning consultants in this area. The plan is to highlight this historic monument and to provide the option to program the lighting for community engagement and to support specific events during the year. The hope is that it will become a wayfinding monument for the Innovation District and something that is celebrated throughout the region. We understand that the community has brought forth some concerns, and we are fully cooperating with city staff to ensure the design and programming of the lights respond to any legitimate concerns. It is not our intention to have these lights on all night long. They will be dimmable, and they will be shielded to protect residents from light spill. Our lighting consultant, Paul Boken, over here, is with us here tonight, and he's here to answer all the really hard questions, as he is the expert in the field. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and we'll take questions now if you have any.
Okay, well, thank you for coming in. Are there any questions of Mr. Barr or the consultant, Councillor Fernandez?
Well, thanks for coming in and speaking about this. So as a councillor who's been concerned about night light and spillage and the impact on the environment, you say that the lights will be dimmable. To what degree will they be dimmable, and where is that light going to be projected?
Yeah, I mean, they're dimmable right down to zero, pardon me. But typically what we do, we program it to start at sundown, and then we usually shut something like this, especially in this area where there's residents, we would maybe shut it off around 11 o'clock. It could be later, we can decide on that, but it's dimmable right down to zero. The other thing we do a lot nowadays is we dim lights or adjust programming during bird migratory seasons as well. So typically our programming responds to those two, curfew and then migratory seasons.
Okay. And when you're talking about programming the lights to enhance events, what exactly would I be seeing?
Well, what we typically do, like important structures, like the smokestack, for instance, we've done a lot of work lighting important structures, bridges. We just recently relit Niagara Falls, our firm did. When we talk about events, typically it depends on the community, right? It could be a local sports team winning a playoff, right? And the colors represent the sports team's colors. It could be Canada Day. It could be any kind of festival, I guess, locally. And I think what's interesting about programmable lighting is it just allows the lighting to connect, or that object is now connected to that event, connected to the community, just by simply changing color.
Okay, so I'm not going to see lettering on the smokestack, or so for Oktoberfest you would maybe use the colors that are synonymous with Oktoberfest.
Exactly. It will have the ability to have a slightly different color at the base, at the top, but that's it. There's no projection mapping or digital media on it at all.
Yeah, I was going to say use our cube, which is perfect for programmable space as well. The concerns that I saw, that I read about, seem to be mainly around spillover and spillage, light spillage. So my understanding is that the units will focus only on the smokestack and not spill into this residential area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're lights that are facing upward. Right, and I'm a strong proponent for controlling light spill and sky glow. I've spoken on the topic at the Regional National Ontario Architects Conference in Ottawa for an hour on the topic of light spill and sky glow. It's a topic that's really close to us as lighting specifiers. We're one of the largest lighting specifiers in the country, so we spec a lot of lights. So we want to make sure we're respecting the environment. So heritage structures like this, often the only way to light them is by pointing them up. And when you point them up, there's a risk of light going into the sky, and obviously some light will bleed into the sky. But what we do is we control the light sources. They're super narrow sources. They're heavily shielded sources, and they're fairly, like in the grand scheme of lighting, very low-powered sources. There's 8 100-watt lights. I mean, the total load you could connect into your wall plug at home. It's like a hairdryer or a vacuum, total load. So it's very small load, very respectful amount of light, and that's done intentionally. We're only lighting as much as we need to.
So would you be monitoring the impact on migratory birds that, before the lighting, after the lighting, would you see if there's a change in the number of bird deaths occurring from the lighting? Is that something you've seen in the past from your previous work?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've researched it extensively, and it's something, it's just an interesting topic for myself. And typically bird migratory deaths and that are related to bird migration are, obviously large cities are very bright. So large cities and just the vast amount of light, which of course the smokestack is just a minuscule drop in the bucket. But those large cities can divert migratory patterns into city cores where they collide with buildings, especially buildings with lights on behind glass, right? Because they see them. But really, as far as bird collisions, when we talk about bird collisions due to lighting, it's more to do with just large, bright cities disrupting migratory paths, and then towers with glazing that have lights on behind them causing collisions. I mean, very low output sources, lighting a wall, for instance, doesn't attract birds to run into the wall. So this smokestack kind of falls outside what I would call the risk zone for bird avian deaths. It's just not in that category.
Okay, thank you very much for your responses. I appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, and quickly, I wanted to say this is in my ward, in my neighborhood. I very much appreciate Deloitte's part in conserving and helping to save a beautiful old building. Too bad the other one was demolished, but we saved one and the smokestack. That's my first point. My second point would be if, have you worked with a tall buildings policy that planners, I believe this week, educating us on? Are you aware of that with our planning department?
Of the tall buildings?
Tall building policy.
Yes, yep.
And lighting forms part of that, I'm
It
sure.
It does, exactly.
Okay, fine. And this document in front of us from the people who have some concerns, you seem to have addressed most of those. Only to light the smokestack on high days and holidays, and the commitment, especially the commitment to fall bird migrations. You have addressed those points.
Yeah, like I said, our programming is usually set up for anything like this, that during bird migration seasons, either we change the color scheme or we dim. Like we light lots of tall buildings. We've lit 15 buildings in the core, say, and large structures, bridges. So that's something that we do not because we're told to. We do because it's a responsible thing to do when you're lighting structures.
Thanks very much. And again, as Ward Councillor, Mr. Mayor, so far I see no problems with this as long as it meets the approval of our heritage people, which I think it does. Thank you.
Councillor Yanetsky.
Yeah, thank you. I have similar questions in terms of the lighting. And would this be lit overnight, or you would just stop it at 11 o'clock or whatever the time is and just leave it until the next day?
Yeah, I think on a typical day, like programming is something we're kind of working through, of course, but on a typical day, especially given the area and given that there's not a lot of night traffic, during the week, after 10 p.m., 11 p.m., the idea that it would be turned off. During holidays or maybe weekends, depending on, I guess, maybe how the nightlife evolves in the area, could that be extended to midnight or something like that, potentially? But usually, facade lighting, we time very similar to like feature lighting in a downtown core office tower, right? We start phasing it out around 11 o'clock when there's really no one out to appreciate it, but also because curfew, there's residences nearby.
Would it be similar to what you see lighting on the CN Tower in terms of the color spans and stuff like that, or there'll be a string of lights going from the bottom to the top of the smokestack?
I mean, CN Tower is what I would consider like a direct view effect. In other words, there's like pixels every foot that go up the elevator shaft, for instance, and around the edge, so it's very animated. So I call that like a pixelated effect. There's probably, I think there's 2,500 different addresses just going up the elevator shaft. So we don't have that same technique. It's not at all. We're more focused on not seeing the light sources, so to speak, like the CN Tower does, but lighting the surface of the smokestack. And when we do that, we're not applying lights to the surface that you can see. We're just lighting the texture of the surface. So there's no opportunity to animate it like the CN Tower. We just don't think the infrastructure, well, first off, I think that would be probably an irresponsible amount of money to spend lighting a smokestack, although I love the idea of the smokestack, but I think it's just not appropriate, so no, the answer is no.
Now, the smokestack is a circular building, basically, as opposed to a square going straight up. So you'll have lighting done in such a way that it gets all parts, I guess.
Exactly. So there's I guess if you wanted to animate it, there would be a way that you could kind of shift the light slowly around the circumference of the smokestack. And like I said, we're kind of separating the base and the top in two different zones. So there's a slow gradient from top to bottom, and then potentially a movement around the smokestack. But we have 16 lights on it, so to liken it to the animation the CN Tower gets, it's a different effect altogether.
Right. Now, I guess discussions and facts have been mentioned over the years that, especially like in Toronto or large cities with a lot of lighting, you get a high office tower building that's steel and glass and it's lit. Of course, you'll probably have a lot of head-on collisions by the birds.
Yeah.
But with this smokestack scenario, it's just basically a dark structure with just some lighting. So I guess the numbers of birds, I mean, you may just have some birds hit it, but I guess the numbers would be totally small, just because you don't have a really bright light source. Is that correct?
No. I mean, it takes a lot of light from a direct source, like those sky beam searchlights are known to disorient bird. If a bird gets in the path of one of those, which are infinitely brighter than what we're doing, they can get disoriented temporarily and hit something. Is probably the most impact. That's where lighting typically interferes and where lighting causes impacts with disorientation. But the amount of light that's going on this is a fraction of that, and it's lighting a surface. It's not just pointing straight up into the air. So it's actually lighting an object that a bird would hit. So it doesn't fall under the case where it causes any risk to birds.
Right.
Birds won't run into a lit wall at night.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions that we have, so thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, our next delegation is Mr. Roger Suffling. Welcome, Mr. Suffling.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Bravanovich, council, staff, and visitors. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. First of all, I want to preface my remarks with the fact that the group that I'm speaking for is very enthusiastic about repurposing buildings, reusing heritage buildings and so on. It's terrific return on investment, it's tremendous for the community, and it builds character in a city. We do, however, have some real concerns with this lighting project, which is not central to the repurposing of the building and will lead to a number of problems. We were surprised to hear that first of all, I should say that I'm one of a group who are members of Waterloo Region Nature, Grand River Environmental Network, and FLAP, which is a specific charity in Toronto that's got an international reputation for its work on bird collisions and bird problems with built structures. We were surprised to hear that the Heritage Kitchener Committee had already endorsed the aesthetic lighting of the chimney as proposed by the proponent. The proposal has problems in common with similar projects in other cities, and these other projects are rightly facing public questions and criticism. There are two general problems with night lighting, and I'm talking specifically about structures like the kind of structures that we're talking about. One is the uplighting of structures that leads to birds circling around them and getting confused and then colliding with the structures with consequent mortality. Sometimes these collisions are spectacular and grisly in terms of the numbers of birds involved. I didn't put it in the text, but the term slaughter comes to mind. The URLs that we distributed with previous material will give you some idea of what's going on with a lot of these structures. In particular, the red lighting that's proposed here is associated with high bird mortality. And when the proponent in the document that they submitted uses the word beacon, that's exactly what's happening. The structure that's lit is bringing the birds in, and you get a lot of kill under those circumstances. The other circumstance that we're interested in is night glare to neighbours and night glare generally in the city. And these are not conservation concerns in the sense that we have, but they are still major issues in this context. So I want to turn to some specific examples of bird kills around structures. The first one is a power plant stack in Cheshire, Ohio, and I've been trying to pick structures that are equivalent to what we're looking at here. 2,000 birds killed in one night. Long Point Lighthouse, which is in Ontario on Lake Erie, 1,411 individuals of 49 species killed in one fall season. And there's a Nova Scotia lighthouse here with 115 birds of one species dying on 2 consecutive nights. Now, these structures have walls that are lit from the outside with uplighting, or did at any rate at that time, and they're equivalent to what you're looking at here. The idea that a lit wall will not cause bird mortality is not supported by the facts. And I'm speaking as an ecologist here. I know very little about lighting, but I do know about bird mortality. There's a broader context here in that LED lighting is becoming very cheap, and so there's a tendency to use it profligately with attendant problems. The Joseph Street stack is the tip of the iceberg issue. We, in our group, we've been working with staff on the tall buildings policy, and these sorts of questions have come up in the discussions that we had. So who will decide on how lighting is done in the city? A few designers and proponents, or the broad community? There's also a political context. When birds die in large numbers, as they do in some of these structures, they will literally be swept away at dawn, but it does come out. And you can see on the second page of my handout here a picture of bird kill in Toronto. When those sorts of pictures and indeed videos of birds dropping out of the sky are publicized, it becomes a public issue. It's bad vibes, bad PR for the proponent and for the community. And sometimes it results in legal problems, and sometimes when you get groups like People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals involved, you have people climbing over structures and waving flags and generally getting a lot of media attention. You don't want that kind of attention. In fairness, careful regulation on when and how structures are lit can dramatically reduce bird mortality. The difficulty that FLAP had in Toronto was that they would work with owners and tenants of buildings, and then the tenant or the manager would change, and then the practices in that building would change, and the mortality would spike. You have to find some way of putting in a formal agreement that will lead to good management practices that will be kept in the long term. We don't want to rain on the proponents' parade. It's a great project generally, but here is an opportunity to foreshadow and anticipate the kinds of issues that may come up repeatedly under the tall buildings policy, and to work with an individual developer here to bring about a workable solution. Let's see a modified lighting approach and a formal agreement to light the structure only on high days and holidays. From what I heard this evening from the lighting expert, I don't believe that he understands the nature and the dynamics of bird mortality yet. And I think that you should lead the proponent in that direction. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. If you can stay at the mic, we do have some questions for you. Councillor Fernandez.
Hello, Roger. Thank you for coming in and making your presentation. So I take it by your last statement that what you heard from the proponent did not put your mind at ease with regards to how they were going to light the tower and the dimmability of the lights?
Yeah, I mean, there are two issues here. One is a human issue, and that's the management of the system once it gets in place. How do you ensure that it is in fact managed the way that was intended over the long term, or indeed that things are tweaked if they're not working? Okay. The second issue is that I deliberately picked examples of lighthouses here because they represent tall, narrow structures with uplighting as they were originally lit. The lighting's been changed on most lighthouses because of these problems. Okay. So you can and you will run into problems with that kind of lighting if it's not properly regulated.
So my understanding is that you're suggesting that we have a discussion with the proponent about some very clear guidelines on how the tower, the smokestack, would be lit, the hours of lighting, the dimmability of lighting. What other suggestions do you have?
The seasonality.
Seasonality.
Time of day. And there are some unpredictable factors. You know, when the cloud cover is low, and that's going to happen episodically with the weather as it changes, the migrating birds are forced down, and that's when you get your mortality incidents. Somebody managing that tower on a day-to-day basis who's not an ornithologist is not going to anticipate those problems.
Okay, thank you very much for the additional information. It's very important to our decision.
Councillor Yunetsky.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for coming in. In your report here, you've identified 3 examples in Cheshire, Ohio, Long Point, and Nova Scotia. Those statistics that you have are occurrences that happened how long ago? Recently, or does that mean many years ago?
They're mostly a number of years ago. And the reason for that is that the lighting patterns on tall, narrow structures have been changed. So you have to look back in time to find other people who were using this kind of, they weren't using LEDs, but they were using, lighting of the walls of the structures a number of years ago. There's one example I didn't put down, which is because it's a much taller structure, and that's the Lennox Power Station of former Ontario Hydro, Power Gen now. They switch their lighting from lighting the whole tower, and they do that for safety for aircraft. They switch from solid lighting to strobe lighting, and they cut the bird mortality, I believe, from memory, about 80%. But they didn't use arc lighting up the surface of the tower.
Right. Well, let me then reverse the whole situation. That smokestack's been there for almost 100 years.
This one, yeah.
Do you think any birds have hit it along the way in the last 100 years?
Oh, I'm sure they have, yeah.
So do you think by putting lighting it'll worsen the situation or not?
Absolutely. The amount of bird strike that you get on a structure can be shown graphically to increase as the lighting goes up. There's a curve that people have worked out.
All right. Appreciate that. And similar to Councillor Fernandez's question, the previous delegation had indicated they had provided and will be doing, I guess you can call monitoring and reducing lighting for appropriate times and migration seasons, etc. If we put in conditions in the heritage recommendation to add some control from a staff point of view, would that satisfy you?
I would much rather see the structure not lit at all, but we're trying to be realistic here as well with this sort of balance of power in the situation. I think if you can work something out, that will help. If you do that, you should work with people who really know a lot about it, and the FLAP organization in Toronto. They're the people who really know their stuff on this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Vrbanovic. Thank you for coming in. I'm wondering if you could, with the information you gave us here, there's the picture, the flap display of dead birds from Toronto buildings, April 2017. So is this showing the birds just from this building or a collective of Toronto buildings?
That's from they have a patrol that goes around and picks up injured and dead birds. The injured ones they look after, the dead ones they put into freezers. And then they cart them all along to the Royal Ontario Museum once a year and build a display. This particular picture was the one I could get hold of. There are much bigger displays with more birds on them. But that's an aggregate from numbers of buildings, from lit window situations, all kinds of situations, not necessarily narrow towers that are lit up lighting.
Okay.
But it gives you an indication of the scale of the problem. This is that birds hitting human-made structures is the second largest human cause of mortality of birds after domestic cats.
And what does FLAP stand for?
Fatal Light Awareness Program.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. That appears to be all the questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, do you have questions of staff? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Yunetsky.
Yeah, questions to staff. I don't know, maybe Leon Bensason. We have here before us a recommendation from the Heritage Committee that they recommended approval of it with a couple of conditions. But the issue of lighting and the control of the lighting in terms of the hours of operation, seasonal, and all those issues that we have discussed, they're not really matters of heritage concern, or are they, or are those types, or can we add conditions to this particular recommendation to address that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're right that we have applied conditions, and the two conditions that have been applied to this heritage permit relate directly to heritage-related matters, principles, and practice. So our primary concern relates to the potential impact that the application or the alteration would have on heritage fabric. So the conditions that perhaps Council is now contemplating adding, which would be more of an environmental related condition, is not something that is based on the heritage principles and practice and regulations that we would apply. So I would caution Council only in the respect that if you add a condition that is not something that is directly heritage related, that is potentially something that the applicant can appeal. It's an appealable condition that they may not agree to.
So, and I understand that they could take that to the next level for the board approval on that. So, what is maybe to other staff? What is the alternative if you want to do something to add some type of condition dealing with environmental? How do we do that? I have no idea. As opposed to, I mean, I understand where Leon's coming from on the heritage component, and this isn't one. But what's the alternative?
I believe one thing to consider would be to speak to the applicant and see if there are things that they are willing to agree to upon consent. They have come forward and said that this is a matter that's important to them as well and that they've considered it and addressed those issues. Perhaps they would be willing to agree to something as a condition that would reflect what they've told Council they plan to do anyways.
Through the recommendation, by adding something to this? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps if they are willing.
I'm sorry?
Upon consent, if they are willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. I have a proposed amendment to this recommendation, and that would just, and maybe we could ask the proponents to give a nod or not to say if this would be amenable to their plans, but that staff be directed to work with the proponent to arrange a formal agreement related to minimizing the impact on residents and birds. Minimize the lighting impact on residents and birds. Enter a conversation, okay. I mean, I think it's worth a conversation.
Okay. Thank you. That appears to be all the questions at this point in time. Who is bringing forward Heritage Kitchener? Councillor Ioannidis, would you like to bring forward the recommendation? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that we, pursuant to item number 1, do I need to read this out?
No.
Okay.
That's fine. So number 1 has been moved. Councillor Marsh, you're moving a, do you have it written out or? Yep, thank you. You're moving an amendment. Okay, the amendment's been seconded by Councillor Fernandez. Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My recommendation is that you take whatever is about to be put on the screen as a separate motion. This really has nothing to do with heritage issues and so shouldn't be connected to your heritage recommendation.
I agree.
Okay. That's fine. I think that's a good point, so I will deal with that. So I'll deal with, Councillor Ioannidis, if you can click in.
I'm clicked in.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because can I make a comment, I guess, since I brought
Yeah,
forward
yes.
this?
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
like, I'm prepared to support the heritage recommendation. I'm not prepared to support Councillor Marsh's secondary motion, because we're already doing a study on this with tall buildings. I don't want to go and jump the gun on something that we're not even sure what we're doing yet, so, and set some form of precedent, so I'm not ready to support that.
Okay, any other comments? Sorry, good, legal would like to make, go ahead.
Just another comment is that council does have separate authority through nuisance under the Municipal Act to regulate some of these matters generally. So not necessarily on a case-by-case agreement basis, but there is always the possibility of bylaws as well.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Marsh.
Thanks. Just if I could ask Ms. Shearer to elaborate on that. So are you saying that the nuisance bylaw is, or whoever wants to answer this question, is the nuisance bylaw that we currently have already equipping us to handle potential problems down the road, and this is superfluous, or are we potentially in danger of just waiting for the tall buildings guidelines to be put into place, and then this type of project that would already be implemented might be grandfathered through regardless of whatever parameters we put in place?
The current nuisance bylaw does not address this. It's on different things altogether.
So what are you saying about the nuisance bylaw related to this matter? What was your comment trying to tell us about it?
That under the Municipal Act, council has authority to regulate with respect to lighting issues and in public nuisances.
And so if we tonight approve this heritage recommendation and the lighting gets installed, and then later we enacted a new nuisance bylaw, would that be retroactive to existing structures like that?
There would be no legal non-conforming on public nuisance, if that's what you're asking. So yes, a new bylaw could potentially be applied to this sort of situation.
Okay. So are you recommending that this is too much of a one-off rather than something that needs to be more citywide?
I'm not making a recommendation either way on that, just providing some information.
All right.
Okay, before I go to others who want to speak, just further to that, is this not something that actually is covered off anyway through the site plan agreement, and all lighting issues and so on are dealt with through the site plan agreement, and therefore this would seem to not be necessary? I guess that's a legal question. Like, lighting is typically a site plan agreement issue. Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would draw Council's attention to an email you received last week on this issue. Lighting of a smokestack such as this requires no planning approvals other than the heritage permit before you. So we have no formal legislative authority to require anything. Our experience has been that these applicants have been very open to making changes to make this work for them and for the community. And so if you want to pass this motion, that would be in council's hands. I think we likely would be doing that anyways, based on what I understand of previous conversations. We have no legal authority to make them do this.
Okay, but I guess, Mr. May, just...
There is no site plan process right now.
Oh, there isn't for the site at all?
No, not for the lighting of the tower.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to understand how this is different than lighting in the parking lot and you know, all the requirements that we typically put around lighting on a site. Why wouldn't this be covered as part of that?
Because that's part of the formal comprehensive site plan review process. My understanding is that this is an addition and that on its own it does not require a planning application.
Okay.
And I would again draw the attention to the email that was circulated to council that provided this information.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Yanetsky, you were next in the queue.
I understand where Mr. Michael May is coming from, and I would agree with him. However, wasn't there a previous site plan application for the site, for the surrounding area in terms of development? To create a parking lot and facilities there as part of it? So I think already you have on title the site plan agreement with probably maybe a lighting plan already in there to light up the parking lot, and this is sort of an accessory to it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I suppose I would point council to the fact that the direction in terms of the guidelines for lighting in relation to site plan applications is specifically for parking and parking lots. There is no direction or guidelines in the urban design manual that speak specifically to the lighting of architectural features. There is a statement that discourages uplighting. However, for reasons that were indicated previously, this is a very unique and special opportunity, and because of the significance and the uniqueness of the smokestack, it was felt that this was one occasion when perhaps uplighting of this nature should be considered. But insofar as having specific guidelines on the lighting of architectural features in buildings, those are not regulated or dealt with in the urban design manual.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent answer.
Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, mine's just with regards to the amendment, or however we're going to deal with that, arrange a formal agreement. I'm just concerned about the formality of it. Is your intent really just to make sure or give staff direction to have a conversation? Is that to enter into a conversation that could potentially minimize? So I'm not sure we have the ability to have a formal, or what kind of formal agreement we're looking for, and who approves that formal agreement.
Councillor Marsh.
A conversation is what I had in mind. However, the reason I put a formal agreement in there is because I think that a handshake agreement or a conversational agreement is one thing, but if down the road maintenance staff on that site or additional factors enter into play, then it may be that there's nothing for the city to stand on to enforce potential changes if we find that we have a lot of complaints. But I didn't recognize when I wrote this that there is actually a nuisance, a tool for us to be able to do that down the road if need be. So if that's the sticking point for my colleagues from voting in favor of this amendment or this additional motion, then we can make it I'm okay with just to strike the word formal, to arrange an agreement. Yeah, basically. I don't, and who would approve it regarding this agreement, whether it's formal or informal? It would be staff. It's not something that would ever come back, that in my mind would need to come back to council. Okay, thank you.
So perhaps I can suggest that what you're trying to achieve is to arrange guidelines related to minimizing the impact of lighting on residents and birds. Because agreement typically conjures up something that is formal and authorizes the clerk and mayor to sign and so on and so forth. Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
And I'm comfortable with that change because I think what I heard Councillor Marsh say is she wanted to see a conversation. The proponent nodded his head and said that he could understand having a conversation. And I think this is how you build community and you build respect between a proponent and some issues that have been raised by our community. So I would absolutely support this. I think this is, when I was writing out a motion myself, and Councillor Marsh just beat me to the punch. So I think that there's nothing wrong with having a conversation about some guidelines that speak to some legitimate concerns within this community.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I completely believe that all of this is going to happen, but I see nothing wrong with this kind of suggestion from Councillor Marsh. She also beat me to the punch as ward councillor, but the one thing I would ask is that because of the context I have received, I would suggest that we introduce the one word neighbouring ahead of residence, because, well, maybe I shouldn't even say because, but I think the impact is going to be, any impact is going to be on neighbouring residents and not someone living elsewhere in the city. And I've had contacts with a few other people living elsewhere in the city about lights at night. So neighbouring residents would be, I don't think would do any harm. And also I would ask Councillor Marsh if she also wants, instead of just boldly saying birds, say birds during spring and fall, bird migrations, as is suggested by Mr. Suffling. But again, I can live with any of these wordings, and I don't think it does. I can live with any of the wordings. I don't think it'll do any harm to vote on this, but I think it needs just a little tweaking.
Councillor Marsh?
I will defer to the ward councillor on one part of that. I mean, we can add the word neighbouring, that's fine, it's pretty much implied. But I think we're going to leave the ending of the sentence with birds, because from what we have learned tonight, these types of lights in other communities have impacted birds in all seasons. So I have confidence that this is going to be a wonderful addition to our downtown. This lit up smokestack. I hope that the lengthy conversation that we have here is. I hope that our guests tonight do not think that this is a reflection of our welcoming of Deloitte to our community and the smokestack being lit. It's going to be great, but let's just make sure that we are covering our bases in minimizing impact. We know that sometimes once a concept is put in place and implemented, that unexpected results happen, and so it's important for us to just try and do our best to make sure it works for everyone and for the birds.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, surprised the direction this whole conversation has taken, especially with the intent of the amendment. I thought that we were in the process of coming forward with tower separation guideline or tall tower guidelines that would have addressed this very point. I think we're kind of circumventing that process a little bit. And now with additional tweaking of neighboring, I didn't think that I had a conflict with the intent of the original recommendation, with what's there, but with all the morphing of the direction it's going, my parents have property near enough that I would declare conflict, but I think it's kind of silly at this point which direction we're heading with all this.
Okay, your conflict's been noted, I guess, at this point. I'm going to just make my own comments. I will support the motion and the second motion that's here, although I don't feel that it's necessary. I think to be very clear, we have two significant companies. First, the building owner, and secondly, a major national reputable company that is not going to want to see their brand muddied by problems going forward. And I think we need to keep that in perspective. I think we heard from Mr. Barr that they're amenable to having a dialogue and working in guidelines, which is exactly what I would have expected them to do, nothing less than that. And if a motion is what helps solidify that for folks, I'm happy to support it in its current wording. But I think we need to keep in mind that This is a major company that has made major investments and consolidated their staffing in this new space, and we want to make sure that things are reflective of that. And I will just add that there's a similar smokestack actually in Eindhoven, Netherlands, a community that this region is partnered with, and it's from, I believe, the old Philips factories, and it is lit as well. I think this is a way of recognizing a great piece of our historic manufacturing architecture in this community. So with that, I'll deal with the original motions first that are in the Heritage Report. Councillor Singh? Yes.
So in clarity, I don't think I have a conflict on the initial recommendation that was in the report, but it's just the amendment with the wording neighboring properties. So I'll declare conflict on that part of it.
Okay. Yeah. If the clerk can note that, please. So dealing with the heritage part, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Dealing with the secondary motion, sorry? A recorded vote? Sure. All those in favor? Opposed? One conflict noted. That motion carries. Okay. Thank you, folks, for coming in, and thank you for working collaboratively with us on this. We're going to move on to clause number 2 in the Heritage Report next, and we have a delegation here for that one, and that's Mr. James Kober. Is it 3? Sorry. Sorry. It is number 3, yes. Apologies for that. Go ahead, Mr. Kober. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm here in regard to the South Kitchener District Park. And I've had the privilege of this week meeting with the gentleman from the Historical Society and with the contractor, the manager of the park, Mr. Trevor Jacobs. And so I listened and sort of was brought up to speed with what's being considered for the park. Now, we were given a piece of information, I'm not sure if you have that or not, that details the park and all of the different 1, 2, 3 phases. I don't know if the members have that, but I want to speak for just a moment about a cottage that was on that property, and I do so because I was born in that house. And it's a stone house, and it's secondly important to me because the stone in that house saved my life. August the 17th, 1952, a hot water heater blew up and totally demolished the interior of that house. And the record is in the Kitchener-Waterloo archives on August the 18th and 19th. And because of those stones, the house didn't blow apart, and I'm here tonight. So I have a couple of reasons why I'm interested in this place. Now, Trevor Jacobs explained to me the best plan they could come up with was to lift the house and move it to another location to fit in with all of the sports fields and all of the other things that are being planned there. And our family had hoped that council wouldn't waste money trying to move this old thing. It's in a horrible state of a shamble right at the moment, boarded up, roof caved in, and it's a mess. And I thought anybody would be out of their minds to try to move this thing. But I was reassured it could be moved easily with not too much cost, and that was the best plan. The plan for the park is to have a cafe and washrooms. And I told Trevor Jacobs, I said, I simply don't like the idea of the park using our old house for public washrooms. And so my appeal tonight is that we, having moved the house, use the house for the cafe and then build beside it public washrooms. And our family would be delighted if something like that could be done. That's the basic idea of what I wanted to present, and I'd be glad for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We do have some questions for you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Hi, thanks for coming in. It's good to see you again. I just wanted to reiterate what you've said. Initially, your concern was that you read that it was going to cost a lot of money to move it. Since meeting with staff, you've realized that the difference isn't that much, but that you don't like the idea of it being a washroom facility.
Yeah, there was an article in the paper several weeks ago about $500,000 it was going to cost, and our family said that just doesn't sound right to spend that kind of public money to move that kind of a place. And so that was our first concern until I spent time with the people I mentioned, and I was brought up to speed with what was being planned and considered.
Right. So you are aware, I was on the phone conversation with you as well, that it will still cost approximately, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but $200,000 to move that building.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's all my questions. I just wanted to thank you for coming out and for tracking me down and giving us this proposal and something to consider. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. That's all the questions we have.
Okay.
Councillor Ioannidis, if we can bring number 3 forward, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Singh that we approve item number 2.
Number 3.
Or item number 3, sorry.
Okay. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I have some questions of staff.
Okay, go ahead.
I need to understand better. I've read the report, and it's really around financing, so it's probably more Denise than Leon at this point. I'll just let you get down before I bombard you with my question. So my question really is with regards to financing, or the financial aspect of this. The breakdown that you've given us is approximately $200,000 to just pick up the house and move it. Is that correct? I should get that in front of me. I just didn't print it.
Go ahead, Ms. McGoldrick.
So through you, Mayor, the breakdown that was provided for council was a total cost, but Councillor Galloway-Seelock is correct that the estimate for the movement of the home is $200,000.
Okay, and then to build new is $575, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I guess my question comes around, how is it possible that it's only $65,000 difference when we're paying $200,000 to move the structure, but still need to outfit it with all the same fixtures that we would need to if it was new construction? I'm having a hard time understanding that the shell of the building is going to cost as little as, that. So I'm trying to understand that.
So through you, Mayor, with the costing information that we have, it is, as Councillor Galloway-Seelock noted, estimated to be $65,000 more to move and repurpose the heritage home than it is to build from a new structure. And I mean, not being a building expert myself, my understanding is that a lot of those costs are related to structural costs. And so by having, essentially, as you mentioned, the shell in place, we're not expending the dollars in a new construction in terms of creating the shell. The bulk of the monies would then be around the internal outfitting of the plumbing and the fixtures and those things, such as you mentioned.
Ms. Fletcher, you wanted to add something?
Through the chair, I did walk through these numbers with project staff last Thursday, and so Councillor Galloway-Seelock is correct. There is an amount allocated for moving the building, but part of preparing the building to be moved is to make sure that it's structurally sound. Once we've moved the building, then there is more to bring it up to a good standard, and then there is a provision to put the amenities in there. So while it does seem odd that it's only $65,000 difference, part of preparing this building to move it will be putting some improvements in it as well.
So the risk, having not seen the report or spoken with the people who have given us the opinion of risk, whose risk is it if we have a company that's saying they can move it and it's not successful? Whose liability, whose risk, what happens at that point?
Ms. McGoldrick?
Through you, Mayor, my thought on that is that we would need to very carefully formulate the procurement and the terms of reference associated with the contractor to look at balancing risk or shifting risk per se onto the contractor, but I'm not sure in terms of how much. I don't know the answer to that question. My sense is we'd be looking to share risk or try to offset risk as much as possible with the contractor.
Was any of that covered or discussed when you met with the moving company? I don't know what better to call it, but moving company that suggested that it was a movable structure?
So through you, Mayor, I myself wasn't part of those discussions, but in speaking with the project manager, Trevor Jacobs, his feedback was that the moving company has done this type of work in the past, and they didn't see any significant risks in terms of moving the structure. So their recommendation was that, yes, it is possible to move it with minimal or no damage.
And they were the ones that gave us the amount for to move it intact?
Yes, I believe the consultant Stantec engaged with them based on their prior experience to look at the cost estimate.
And the importance of approving this right now, how high of a priority or is it for us to make a decision today? I think we need to understand the risk and what we would be liable for.
Okay. So through you, Mayor, in terms of timing, the movement of the house wouldn't occur until spring of 2018. What you will see before you tonight is also a grading tender, which we would like to proceed with moving forward with those works. So the only component of the grading tender would be if council were to look at keeping the house in situ or in its current location. That would have overall project implications. However, if if the further discussion, we can certainly delay the discussion in terms of the heritage component until later, provided that council didn't want to continue to consider the option of leaving it in situ.
Okay. I'm probably way over my time, but one last question. I lost it. It's okay. It'll come back to me.
We'll come back to you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm actually hearing new information right now. I'm not sure if the rest of council has any concerns of this as well. But I was thinking of, I'm not sure if this is where Councillor Galloway-Seelock was going, but potentially moving deferral of this item till perhaps committee on Monday, so we could all get some more information on all the options here. So before I move that, I'd like to ask Ms. McGoldrick, if it's deferred by a week, does that cause any issues on your end?
So through you, Mayor, in terms of the heritage matter itself, that would not cause any concern or issues. However, we would like to proceed with the grading tender so that we can get that work underway this fall.
Okay, so sorry, so the grading, okay, supposing for the moment, because I don't have all the information on it, I'll be frank, I'm uncomfortable with some of the numbers I'm hearing thrown around here. If this is deferred and we go ahead with the grading tender, does that imply then that the house needs to be moved? Supposing council decides to ultimately demolish it or something else, can we still move ahead with the grading tender and defer this portion?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The options that would still be on the table is moving the house intact. It is the other option is demolishing the house and perhaps using the stonework in some other matter. So the only option that would no longer be on the table would be keeping the house in situ in its current location.
Okay, I would move deferral in that case. Then
I'll come back to you for that.
Okay.
Ms. Fletcher, you wanted to add something?
Through the Mayor, I think if Council can be clear on the additional information that they would be looking for, that would be helpful to staff.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I think, I can't speak for everyone, I guess we'll see when we vote, but I think I need to be walked through the finances of this much more clearly in terms of the cost of moving it versus a new build and what the risks are in terms of the likelihood we can even move it. That's my primary concern.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I remembered
your last question.
Yeah, I remembered it. Has there been any thought into, because one of the options that's not here is the one that Mr. Colbert brought forward with regards to doing something else, moving the building, doing something else with it, and building. I know that means more money, but has that been given, any thought been given to that?
So through you, Mayor, I don't have any costing information associated with that. We would need to build an additional washroom facility, as you mentioned, and still move the home, and repurpose and refurbish the home. So we can certainly bring that back and then look at what a cost estimate for that scenario would be.
Yeah, I would appreciate just a high level cost estimate if it's going to be deferred anyways. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Although I don't necessarily disagree with having additional information, the Heritage Committee did approve and forward their approval that we would relocate the original farmhouse. So how does this additional time frame affect their recommendation to council?
Mr. Bensasol?
I don't, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the 1 week delay will impact things from a heritage perspective. So the recommendation that was before you is with regard to the notice of intention to demolish and relocate. And that's because this is a listed property. The owner must give council 60 days notice of their intention to demolish. In this case, council would have those 60 days to decide whether they want to designate as a means of preventing the demolition of the south addition and the relocation. Staff's recommendation of approval and Heritage Kitchener's recommendation of approval to council was based on the scenario that was approved in the Heritage Impact Assessment, which was to relocate the farmhouse. You would still need the demolition permit in order to do that. So either direction that council goes, whether that is to relocate or to demolish, they would still require a demolition permit, and that would mean taking no action on a designation. The only scenario where perhaps there's a wrinkle in all of that is whether council wanted to keep the building in situ in its place right now, in which case you wouldn't want the demolition permit.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. Just the one further clarification that I would want with additional information. Councillor Galloway-Seelock had mentioned it was the liability. I don't know if, Scott, you had touched upon, I don't know, you said Okay, because to me that's rather important, because if the structure collapses as it's moving and we're paying the full cost for it, we're really out of a lot of money.
Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I'm just questioning about why we need to defer the part of the motion about grading, because I know that the last we talked about this site, if we kept the home in situ, it would really diminish the overall efficiency of the space. It would really compromise that, and so I'm just wondering if the motion to defer has anything to could not be separated from the grading portion, because we can, in my opinion, we shouldn't even consider keeping the home in situ.
Well, I think staff has already indicated that they would like to see that dealt with separately, and I take Councillor Davies' motion to be only on the issue of the home, not the issue of the grading.
I didn't
the deferral.
Catch that. That's okay. It is. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. McGoldrick, did you want to add something to that, or?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I just want to clarify the reason why I brought the grading is actually being considered under a separate report for tender award. But I just wanted to make sure Council was aware of the implications of proceeding with the tender award in terms of the options that were laid out to Council in the email on Friday.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I agree that the tender needs to proceed forward. Mr. Mayor, I was wondering, well, we have Mr. Kober here, if I may just ask him one more question.
Sure. Mr. Kober, if you can come back to the podium, please.
Just because it looks like, or I don't know for sure, but we might defer it, and I think it's just a question. Hi again. So your initial response to me when you connected with me was that if there was any, it was $500,000 that you thought it was going to cost to move your home, and you were like, don't waste the money to do that, right?
That was the first reaction when we read the notice in the paper. But after we got more information of what was happening, what was developing, and what was being planned, we were quite happy. If it's only $65,000, well, that seems like small peanuts in a way for council, so we weren't going to give anybody a hard time on that.
Yeah, but if it's any significant amount of money, like right now the cost is $200,000 to move it, I'm just trying to gauge, because you're here representing all your siblings and your family, if there's any significant amount of money, the conversation that we've had was that you didn't think it was worth it. Leon, I know you have a difference of opinion.
I know my son worked on a house like that near Fergus all winter. Only a shell was left and the roof. Until that was finished, it was close to $800,000. So that's sort of a practical sum that I'm aware of what it takes to restore that kind of a building.
Right. So if there's any, I'm just trying to gauge from you, if there was any significant amount of money outside of what we would be spending on a new build, are you in favor of moving the home, or would you not be?
Just going to change it slightly.
Yeah.
After the house is moved, there are still many huge granite stones in that foundation and wall that could be used any number of places, even as a part of the construction of the washrooms. And so Trevor Jacobs is very much aware of this, and he says, we will store all those rocks somewhere to be used down the road.
Well, okay. Thank you.
That's all the questions we have. Thank you, sir. Before I go back to Councillor Davey, just in terms of additional information coming back, I guess one of the pieces that I would be interested in coming back is sort of the history of how we've handled similar kinds of buildings in the development community, because I think one of the things we need to ask ourselves, and we may not like the answer, but is are we treating ourselves differently than what we've asked the private sector to do with these kinds of buildings? And I think we need to factor that in as part of our decision process as well, because I know there's been a number of these kinds of homes where we've required the developers to relocate them and maintain them going forward. And so I'd like a little bit of a history synopsis as part of whatever comes back. So, Councillor Davey, if you want to click in and move your motion to defer, until when?
Yes, I would just defer it. I'm assuming if staff's already gone through the numbers, I would just defer it to committee next week. I think Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Chapman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're certainly happy to come back with the information you've requested. In conversation with Ms. McGoldrick, we think it's not possible to bring that detail back for the 2nd. We'd request that you set the deferral date for the next council meeting, which is October the 16th.
As long as that doesn't cause any concerns on staff's end, that's fine with me.
Okay, so motion for October 16th. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ioannidis, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. So we'll be dealing with this again on October the 16th, sir, and a report will be available on the Thursday prior to that online in the council packages. And if at that point you feel you want to register, you can contact the clerk's department ahead of time or come this evening or that evening as you did tonight. Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to the tenders. Somebody want to move the tenders? Councillor Davey. Tender number 1, any questions? Tender number 2, Councillor Yanetsky, go ahead.
Yeah, in tender number 1, and looking on page 3 regarding to the budget, there is a deficit, and yet the money for this phase of work, there's so much is coming from the district park, and so much is coming from community trails, so much is coming from playground, OADA, and so much is coming from neighborhood park. So are we now going to have those 3 categories depleted or reduced, let's say, in terms of their funding? That means 1 or 2 of those projects may not be able to go forward.
Ms. Fletcher.
Through the chair, maybe I'm reading it differently, but I see a surplus of $10,000.
There's a surplus, is what she's saying? Is what Ms. Fletcher is saying, not a deficit? B minus...
Put my mic back on?
Sure, go ahead.
I see there's a surplus, but still the thing is they're still taking money out of 3 other accounts that are going to be reduced in terms of their funding as what, as example, neighborhood park development can be one less project or something.
Through the chair, it was always contemplated that we would be taking monies from these accounts.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
It was always contemplated that that's what the funding source would be for this project.
I see that, but I mean, other projects are going to be reduced. That's the way I see it.
No, I think the point that's being made is that that's what was previously approved as the funding source for this project. This isn't something new, Councillor Yanetsky. Okay. Questions on number 2? Questions on number 3? Questions on number 4? Okay, they have been moved. Actually, I didn't get a seconder. Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll now move on to reports of the committees, and we will go to Community and Infrastructure Services. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Sarah Marsh that items 1 through 10 of the Community Infrastructure Committee recommended be approved.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Fernandez.
I just have a quick question for Gloria McNeil on the pet, the Humane Society, more about pet strategy because it was mentioned in the report. Trying to frame this correctly, and I need to find my page again. You were talking about, on page 2-5, about the responsible pet ownership strategy, and that the Humane Society is willing to perform services at a cost is an opportunity for the city to stretch any money applied to such initiatives. You had 4 points after that. Are you hoping that the pet strategy that you're going to be bringing forward will address the concerns that you have listed here?
Ms. McNeil.
Through Mayor Verbanovic, what we've listed here are some of the discussion points that we've had through contract negotiations of areas that we would like to explore further, because these are areas that we've had raised as concerns or areas that we need to potentially work on.
Okay, so my understanding then is that the contract with the Humane Society and our will enable you to move forward further on the pet strategy. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Through the Mayor, that is the intent, that should we get any money exceeding the, in licensing revenue exceeding the $445,000, that would be directed towards these types of initiatives.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
On this, Councillor Etherington?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Gloria. On page 2-5 of the committee report, there's mention of feral cats. Out of the $913,000 that will go on the Humane Society costs, how much is spent on cats for microchipping, managing, sterilizing? And the report mentions approximately 45,000 dogs in Kitchener and only 15,000 are licensed. Do we know how many cats are in Kitchener? So there's two questions.
Through the Mayor, I don't know how many cats there are in Kitchener, or even a rough idea of how many there are. I do know that feral cats, that whole element is fairly new to the Humane Society, and that is something that we were hoping to address through the responsible pet ownership strategy, to have a better look at that and see exactly what we can do to assist with some of those issues that we've had raised. In terms of the microchipping, that was something that was a recommendation. I think the Humane Society is open to any ideas we can provide them or suggestions in terms of identifying cats and owners of those cats. So that was something that was brought forward by them as consideration to put towards the pet strategy.
No, I understand that, Gloria, but do we have any percentage of the workload that deals with cats at the Humane Society?
Through the Mayor, I don't have an exact percentage. We are estimating from previous conversations with them that about half of their workload would be associated to cats.
Half. And have we ever looked at licensing cats? I've tried this before, but I understand that Guelph, Toronto, Calgary, London tries to license cats, probably other municipalities, in order to meet some of these costs. So have we ever looked at that?
Through the Mayor, I'm not aware of us ever having an in-depth look at licensing of cats. If that was something that Council wanted us to look at, we could certainly look at that moving forward on our business plan.
Okay, thanks very much. Mr. Mayor, I got a comment on this. Can I make it now? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, make it now.
As stated at committee last week, I'm shocked to see this amount of money spent on the needs of animals. I like animals, but compared to the cost of, for example, earlier this evening, the cost of seniors, low-income families who have trouble with their utility costs, It's a massive amount of money to be spending on animals. And something I think is dreadfully wrong with our financial priorities when we can afford to pamper our pets, but sometimes 3 or 4 pets. When I was going around during the last election, I was amazed at how many dogs people have. But anyway, that difference in where we put our money, but we do very little to help people who can't afford those kind of taxes. So I just wanted to make that point. And I'm going to vote in favour of this because, as Councillor Davies said last week, we don't have any choice. The only alternative is to take over this huge responsibility as a municipality, and I can't see us doing that.
Okay. Councillor Yanetsky on this item? No, item 3. Item 3. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, just a separate recorded vote.
Okay, I will deal with that one separately then. Any further questions or comments? If not, I will deal with number 3 first. All those in favor, you want it recorded? Okay, go. Recorded. Sorry? Okay, recorded vote has been called on number 3. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Balance of the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Ioannidis, the last item on heritage, number 2.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovich. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Paul Singh. Item number 2 of Heritage Committee recommendation.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll now move on to unfinished business. Any new business? Any questions and answers? Councillor Yanetsky.
Yeah, question to staff. I've noticed over this throughout the city works people do a wonderful job cutting grass on boulevards and city parks, etc. But I note that on medians, concrete medians that is, and roundabouts, etc., there's all these weeds that are growing through the cracks of the pavements, and they're not even addressed. I mean, the grass looks good, and then all of a sudden you see all these weeds. Is that being addressed by maintenance staff in any way? Because it doesn't look great. I mean, you just look around the city, there's tons of them.
Miss, who wants to handle that? Ms. Fletcher.
I can take the comments back to staff.
Okay. I suspect part of the problem has been since we used to in the old days use herbicide to deal with it, but obviously we can't anymore, so it does create some operational challenges that I guess staff will need to look at and report back on. Any other questions? If not, bylaws first reading. It's been moved by Councillor Schneider, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that lead be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda. I believe is there an additional bylaw? No. Listed on the agenda, the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Fernandez that Council resolve itself into committee of the whole. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Fernandez. Whoops. Go ahead.
So we need to move it for second reading. I'll move it. Moved by Councillor Yanetsky. All those in favor? And so moved.
I'll move number 2.
Okay. Number 2 is moved by the mayor. All those in favor? And so moved. Item number 4. I have a moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Number three.
We've dealt with three.
We've already done number 3. We did number 3. Sorry, number 4 was moved by Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? So moved. And
There's
that
an
item.
additional item.
There's an additional
From
item.
caucus.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have one late, through you, Madam Chair, we have one late starter from caucus regarding the IATSE negotiated settlement.
I'll move that we add the item to the agenda.
Okay. Moved by the mayor. All those in favor? And so moved.
And then I'll move the report.
Okay, and the reports have been moved. All those in favor? And so moved. And that's reverts back to you, right?
No, we'll also move that the committee rise and report. Sorry, you have to.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I move that. You call the vote.
All those in favor? And so moved.
And now if it's been moved by, actually you have to read the next section.
Yes, that the proceedings in the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes are hereby adopted and confirmed. All those in favor?
No,
You say that.
Yeah, all in favor, opposed, that's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Schneider, seconded by Councillor Marsh, that the bylaws listed on the agenda for third reading be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and numbered serially by the clerk. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Etherington that we now adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried.